All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Rise and Grind Morning Show. Apologize about the late entry here, but we had to get a little bit late. A little bit of a late start today, trying to get things put together this morning. Obviously, a lot going on in the NFL. There's so much to talk about. We're going to try to drill it down. We already have some breaking news this morning, a few moves that have already been made for the Detroit Lions, or lack thereof, if you will. So we'll get to that here right away. Let me get Riley in the room, and we'll get rolling. So here we go. Riley, good morning, man. What's happening?
Good morning, Will. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see everybody in the chat this morning, being real lively. And what are we? Is it already Thursday?
It is Thursday. Yes.
You blink. I feel like it was just last weekend, and here we are, Thursday. So yeah, man, excited to be here again.
Yeah, you know what's nuts is, and I just said this a few minutes ago when we were, behind the scenes here, that Alex Anzalone, and I was looking at his contract, and I'm like, holy cow! Like this is his third year already, in this new contract, and it's. So I got questions this morning. I've got questions. We're going to talk about the linebacker room today a little bit because I want to highlight what's going on there. Is Kelvin Sheppard winning? Is he able to get the players that he wanted back? How much influence does he have as a defensive coordinator with, what Brad and Dan are putting together? And, I saw somewhere, I guess Holly Campbell, Dan's wife, put something out with a term, or just one word: reloaded. Are we reloaded? Yeah, we're bringing back the same players we had last season. And as I identified last night, is that really a bad thing that we're reloading with the same cast that we had last year that helped this team win 15 games? A team that was decimated by more than 21. I mean, it was like 30 injuries at one point, but more than 21, injuries to IR. And it's just nuts that people think that our team is not that good if we bring back the same players. So what's your quick thought on that before we get into the breaking news?
Yeah, I mean, the complaint is that all these other teams are getting better. The problem is that they had room to get better, and versus the Lions. So it is the shiny new toy. It's the jealousy. It's the feeling of, man, and I expected these moves, and I didn't know exactly all the players that the Vikings were going to sign or that the Bears were going to sign. And they've made impressive moves, but you still got to go, play on the field. And, it's reloaded. It's a little bit different. It's not like we brought half the guys back, plus we brought in all these 4 or 5 other guys to go with them. We're running it back with most of the same guys, at least for what we see so far. So we'll see how it goes, man. But I'm hoping that we get back to that, defense that the Lions showed the first handful of games last season.
I think that's key too. I'm going to pause for 10 seconds for an audio check. Be right back. Okay, I think we're good. We're back. Right away, let's get into the first headline of the day. Oh, hey. No, I don't want to leave YouTube. Wrong sheet. There we go. Detroit Lions reportedly tendered 2 exclusive rights free agents, and then they just dropped 2 out of the bucket. So this is coming through Pride to Detroit this morning by Jeremy Reisman and Eric Schlitt. What are they talking about? The Detroit Lions have reportedly tendered 2 exclusive rights free agents, but are letting the other 2 walk. This is coming through David Burkett out of the Detroit Free Press. The Lions have tendered interior offensive lineman Michael Neese and linebacker Trevor Nowaski, and letting the other 2 go. So Connor Galvin and defensive end Mitchell Agood, they're going to hit free agency. So exclusive rights free agents are typically very easy re-signings. This is what we've expected so far throughout free agency, that a lot of these guys were going to come back. I'll have to pull up my list and see exactly what my thoughts were on some of these guys. Let's see. The team has an option to offer a tender at a minimum salary, and then the player has 2 options: sign the tender or sit out the entire season. They cannot negotiate with another team. So typically, all exclusive rights free agents are re-signed. The fact that the Lions did not do so with 2 players is a bit unorthodox, according to Jeremy Reisman. I'm not so sure that it's unorthodox for this roster. You made a good point just a moment ago that, other teams had room to get better, right? I think that there's a defining moment on a team's roster where you either have the room cap space wise, or I think what you're speaking to is they had the room on the roster for players to actually be elevated and, upgraded, if you will, from the previous season, where the Lions had a really solid roster. And I think that really showed up last season when we had so many depth guys playing. And because of those depth guys, we win 15 games. Without that depth, we don't. So continuing on with this article here by Jeremy Reisman and Eric Schlitt, Nice only played 35 offensive snaps last year. He was valuable depth, capable of filling any of the interior offensive line positions. That's why he was a game day active for all 17 games over guys like Colby Sorsdahl. I'm not so sure that Colby Sorsdahl makes the roster this year. Detroit did lose Kevin Zeitler last night to free agency, signed with the Titans. So the Lions could afford to keep some extra interior offensive line depth, which makes sense, right? Nowaski, this is a guy that I've been high on. It's a guy that obviously the Lions did not want to lose a couple seasons ago, or was it last season? No, it was the season before. They didn't want to lose him. They were trying to bring him up and down, activating him, the late stages of the year. And then he was poached, I believe, by the Cardinals, played, a handful of games with the Cardinals, and then the Lions get him back. So this is a guy that they've developed. It's a guy that they don't want to let go. I think that Nowaski still has a high ceiling. It'd be interesting to see where he is this year. Nowaski has been one of the Lions' most valuable special teamers over the past 2 seasons. They're speaking to it right here, where they lost him to the Cardinals in 23 and then had to do some roster maneuvering, and then he was back. So the Lions also are returning Pittman and Ezekiel Turner, and they just added former Colts special team phenom, I guess, Grant Stewart. So as for Galvin and Goody, there just doesn't appear to be room on the roster right now, I guess, is what they're saying. Let's get back to, I guess, the main topic today is linebacker room. That's really what I'm going with. We'll get into that here in just a second. Riley, what are your thoughts on these quick moves already this morning?
Yeah, it's just the underlying thought that I have is just thinking back to last season, watching all those games and just having that thought, man, I wish we had, Hutch. Man, I wish we still had just imagine if we had Davenport out there, God, it would be so nice if we had Derek Barnes out there. The whole thought was, if we just could have this defensive unit out with all these players, well, that's what the defense is going to be next year, right? At least going into it, that's what we're hoping for. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure most of us in the chat have been up reading stuff. Grant Stewart, he seems like he is your Jalen Reeves-Maven replacement straight across. He's your special teams guy. But it's this roster roulette, man. It continues to it's a never-ending cycle, right? Trying to get these guys. And I know this morning there's already been another move that we'll get to, but
well, yeah, go ahead with it. I mean, the other move was a cornerback this morning. So what happened just a few moments ago?
Yeah, so we've got Kendall Vildor. He has signed with Tampa Bay on a 1-year contract. And let's see, I think I had the terms of that deal pulled up here. But Vildor's gone. So there's Iffy, there's Vildor, Carlton Davis. Those are all players that won't be back, that the Lions will have to replace next season. But 1-year deal for Vildor, who heads to the NFC South to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about this one. Last year I wanted Vildor back. I thought that he was going to be, phenomenal depth for the Lions. I think that he was put into a really rough situation in 2023. And then again last year, towards the end of the season, he was obviously thrown into another rough situation where he had to come in and fill in. I mean, he got to the point where Kirby Joseph was playing corner, in that final game of the season versus the Commanders. Like, it's not a good situation to be in, especially with all of the other defensive players that we had down already. A quick question that came through the chat right away was Peter Van Larhoven wants to know why why the Lions don't have room when they carry 90 guys into camp. So I kind of highlighted this last night during part of, I don't know, what was a 3+ hour live stream, trying to recap a little bit about what happened. So I was looking at, how many guys do we have signed now versus what's expected to happen through the draft, right? Let's just say we get 6 guys. Maybe we don't get 7 or 8. Maybe we don't get 5. Let's just say we get 6. So if I look at the Lions' current roster, which I thought I had it up. I don't know why I don't. One sec. Thought I had it up.
So his question is, why
don't we have room for these guys? Because we carry 90 into camp. I mean, it's a valuable question, right? I think that when you look at, we have 59 guys signed right now on the active roster, 59 guys. I think that was 62 last night. So we just let 2 walk, right, with the exclusive rights free agents. So they're probably off this list already. Looking at the bottom of the list, they've already made the additions for DJ Reed, Levi Onwuzurike, Roy Lopez, Grant Stewart, Isaac Ukwu, Duron Gilbert, Morris Norris. So all of those guys have been added. I'm a little confused as to why there's a couple of other guys listed here, but let's just roll with it. Let's just say there's 60 guys signed right now. Let's say you add 6 in the draft. That puts you at 66. How many more guys do we need to sign between 66 and 90? The number is 24. If the Lions are going to add a dozen or so, UDFAs like they seem to do every year, I think the number that we came up with last night was 10. Like the Lions still had 10 free agents that they needed to sign. So I think that, to Peter's question, I think the Lions are trying to do what they did last year, and that's elevate the bottom of the roster. In probably add a couple of really good guys yet in free agency that, when I say really good, we're not talking tier 1. Most of those guys are gone, right? We're into tier 4, tier 3 right now. And that's not a knock on these players. It's just salary cap wise where they're lining up. If we still pull in Azeez Ojulari, I mean, great. That's a big elevation in a linebacker room, or as an edge. And I think that kind of speaks to maybe what the Lions are looking at doing here in the draft. If you're letting Mitchell Agood test free agency, doesn't mean that he can't come back. Zadarius Smith, he hasn't signed with anybody yet. Doesn't mean that he can't come back. Lions are going to stay fluid. I feel that Brad has been very patient so far. I know that patience is not what Lions fans are looking for. We always talk about the marshmallow test, and everyone wants marshmallows now. We just need to wait a little bit. I think our roster is plenty good. There needs to be some elevations, and I think we'll see that in the draft.
Yeah, no doubt. And not only that too, but not even just a numerical value or quantity kind of way of looking at it too. It's just, if you are a free agent, why are you going to go to Detroit? If you're like a Roy Lopez, if you're one of those guys where they're coming to you and saying, hey, come fill this role and Nick could elevate your career, you could be part of a winning team. But like Drew Dahlman going to the Bears makes sense because Tevin Jenkins is gone. So for the Lions not having room, there's not a lot of, I don't think there's any starting spots. In fact, I think, let me ask you this. For the amount of players the Lions are going to draft and add to the team here in April, how many of those guys are going to how many of them are going to start? And then how many of them are going to even have significant roles?
That's such a good question because, Brad has done such an excellent job in drafting. And maybe we'll go with that one that we were just talking about. We'll start with that here in just a second. So sure. Brad has done such an excellent job drafting that I think that it turned Lions fans onto 2021. Almost every draftee was starting. Well, the reason why, I know I'm repeating myself because we've spoken about this many times. We didn't have a roster. It was garbage, right? We had a bunch of guys that, it's hodgepodge mix of talent that, really wasn't talented. It was not a talented roster at all. So when you have guys like Malcolm Rodriguez that are showing up and, doing what they're supposed to do, and obviously very cerebral football player, he's going to start, he's going to play. And I think that first, Well, the first games against the Eagles, he bodies Kelsey. And I mean, that was an incredible play by him. That's the kind of attitude you got from Malcolm. So he had to play. So 2021, yeah, our guys had to play. 2022, same thing. We had a light mix of talent. It was starting to get better, but those guys were starting. As you transition to 2023, well, now this roster is starting to get a little bit stacked in areas to where it's harder to crack that starting roster. And furthermore, I get real sick of hearing about the third round draft pick that's a waste of a roster spot in Broderick Martin. If you look around the league, hardly any third round picks start or become extremely good football players down the line. It's not a round that you want to waste the pick in per se, but less than 15% of third round picks play or even start in the NFL ever. That has been the history. Your first two rounds are typically where you're going to strike, some really solid starters. Your third and fourth rounds are typically good rotational players. And yes, you will find those diamonds that happen to pop up from here or there, right? Even in the seventh round, Tom Brady's, the Brock Purdy's. There's so many different players that have come out of every round after the third round, but it's not many, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking less than 1% of these players, or less than 2% of these players in the later rounds that end up being some crazy good, football player for the NFL. It just doesn't happen. So I'm not going to pound the drum that we wasted a pick on somebody, because how many 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks hardly play? Well, Riley, I think that you've got a great topic to discuss this morning, because a team, the Seattle Seahawks, has just done something that has yet to happen in Detroit since Brad took over, as a GM. So I guess discuss a little bit about what happened with the Seahawks and their 2021 draft class, and how, I guess let's make the analogy between what the Seahawks have done and what Brad's done. So what's going on over in Seattle?
Yeah, so Mookie Alexander, he is the producer and managing, editor over at Field Goals as SB Nation. So the Seattle Seahawks kind of channel and forum on SB Nation. So he's got an article that he posted last night. I thought this was really interesting. So the caption is Seattle Seahawks extremely forgettable 2021 NFL draft comes to an end. He goes into it. The Seattle Seahawks are unsurprisingly done with the 2021 NFL draft. Now, I do remember Brad Holmes, this is the year he takes over, and he specifically made mention of he relished the challenge because this is the COVID year. So you didn't have all of that in-person stuff that you normally get during the draft. So he's like, you really had to know your stuff. So Seattle, with a league low 3 picks taken in the COVID draft, given the lack of traditional NFL scouting and combine, other things disrupted by the pandemic, Seattle uniquely punted on this draft. 2 picks from the 2021 stockpile were sent to the New York Jets for Jamal Adams. 1 pick was used on Gabe Jackson, who was promptly given a contract extension, and another was traded for a move up in the draft to select Stone Forsythe. That's it. So here's your recap. Their first round pick traded. Second round pick, D. Eskridge. He's currently an unsigned free agent. Their third round pick was also traded to get Jamal Adams. Fourth round pick, Trey Brown. He's signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Gabe Jackson was their 5th round pick. He is out of the league. Stone Forsythe was their 6th round pick. He just signed with the Giants. And then their 7th round, they traded to get up to select Stone Forsythe. So look, 2021 wasn't that long ago. And you look at a team like Seattle, who's got a good reputation. They're generally, a pretty good team. And they have nothing to show for their 2021 NFL draft. And Mookie Alexander, the author of the article, said he counted at least 23 teams who drafted at least one player in 2021 who has since received a contract extension. While teams like the Indianapolis Colts and Atlanta Falcons saw Will Fries and Drew Dahlman respectively leave for big contracts they were unlikely to pay out, only a handful of teams essentially had a valueless draft in terms of finding a quality player. So it was a tough spot to be in if just in 2021 you've got nothing left to show for it. So when people are talking about Brad Holmes is asleep at the wheel. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. Okay. Let's just look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. All of those guys would be drafted higher than they were drafted. Like Amon-Ra would no doubt be a first-round pick.
In a redraft, yeah.
In a redraft, right?
Yep.
So if you just look at it and said, man, Brad Holmes has gotten like 6, 7 first-round players in 3, 4 drafts, the value is undeniable. And I feel like the Lions are just in a very good spot. And if I didn't feel that, I wouldn't say it. I don't think everything that Brad Holmes does is gold. It takes time to play out. But I feel like so far everything he's done has proved to be pretty on point. And I'm happy with the players that he's selected. And I'm excited to see who he adds to the team in April.
Yeah, I think it's all very valuable conversation here. When you look at a team like Seattle, they are going through somewhat of a hard reset, right? They have a new coaching staff. It makes sense that some of these former draft picks aren't going to be there. But I think that if they were talented and if these players, had the skill to be on the field, then I don't think that a good GM would just let them go. I think that they would find a way to have them stick around. So if Seattle doesn't have any 2021 draft picks left on their roster, I think, again, you need to look at what Brad has been able to do, because I'm looking at 21. We got Penei Sewell, Levi Onwuzurike, who just re-signed yesterday, Aleem McNeil, Penei and Aleem both on extensions now. Ifeatu Melifonwu finally gone this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, huge extension, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Penei Sewell, top 1-2 right tackle in the NFL. Levi Onwuzurike was a top 15 defensive tackle last year through like the first 8 or 10 weeks of the season. He was one of the better at getting pressure up the middle. So, just those 3 alone, or I'm sorry, those 4, Aleem, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Levi Onwuzurike, and Penei Sewell, that's a win. It's a huge win from that draft. Even if it was just Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell, that's a huge win. But he's got 3 major extensions on these guys, and then bringing back Levi to see if he can capitalize on finally a healthy year last year. Well, then you got Derek Barnes. They just extended on a 3-year, $25 million deal. So now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 guys on huge extensions from 2021. Now, maybe some of us don't agree on Derek Barnes as a 4th-round pick out of 2021, that he is, that next outside linebacker of the future. I think that he's average, my take, right? Just like some of you guys don't like Broderick Martin, you may love Derek Barnes. I'm not as high on Derek Barnes because of what I've seen over the last few years of his coverage ability. Doesn't mean that he can't do it. Just haven't seen it quite yet. And last year he got derailed with an injury. So he's coming back. I'm expecting for him to get back to where he was. You could see last year the potential. And I'm hoping that he gets back to that. We've only lost Jamar Jefferson and Ifeatu Melifonwu out of that draft class. When you fast forward to 2022, you've got Aiden Hutchinson, Jamison Williams, Josh Paschal, Kirby Joseph, Malcolm Rodriguez. We've only lost James Mitchell, James Houston, and Chase Lucas, 5th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks. So I'm not worried about that. That's why I don't care about 5th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks and trading those to move up to take a player like Broderick Martin at 96, because they clearly can't stay on the roster when the depth is so good and the talent above them is so good that a lot of 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks just don't hang around. These guys end up being practice squad players a large majority of the time. Fast forward to 23. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. My goodness. 2 first and 2 seconds. I would say they're all 1st round draft picks. Hendon Hooker, we don't know what we have yet. I think that he's a developmental player just like Broderick Martin is. I don't see any difference there. The thing about Broderick Martin, and someone kind of mentioned this in the chat a moment ago, if you guys have not had an opportunity to go to training camp ever and see what Broderick Martin does, I'm inviting you right now. Come to training camp. I'm going to be giving away over 100 tickets again this year to training camp. Come with me. Let's go sit. I might be on the sidelines this year, but come sit and conversate and see what these guys do in practice, because you're not going to see it always in the game because they may not be playing. And I'm not defending necessarily Broderick Martin, the player. I'm just defending the strategy of what Brad Holmes did in the draft. We needed depth at defensive tackle. There wasn't another defensive tackle in the draft that had his size. And it may have been a little bit of a reach. But then again, 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks or whatever Brad had swapped out to move up into the 3rd round wasn't a waste, right? He got a player that could be a project, someone that could hit the field at some point. Now, this is the year. This is the year for Broderick Martin to stay healthy and show what he has. If he doesn't, and it doesn't work out, oh well. You gave up some 5th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks, whatever it was. I think it was 2 5ths and a 6th to move up to the 3rd round. Big deal. These guys don't last on the roster anyway. Now, hindsight 2020, it's a funny game because you can go back and say, well, you know, there was this guy that ended up being a really good defensive tackle that was taken in the 6th round. Was not Kobe Turner. It was it Kobe Turner? No. Who was it that was taken in the 6th round? I don't remember now. But there was one defensive tackle that was really good. Now, could we have grabbed a safety or a wide receiver or another position at 96? Yes, we could have. But when you go and look at all the defensive tackles after Broderick Martin in that draft, nobody did well except for one player, and the name escapes me right now. 23, Colby Sorsdahl hasn't worked out. Antoine Green, nasty injury last year, hasn't worked out. So we lost 2 players so far, but Colby is still on the roster. I'm expecting he probably won't make it this year, but we'll see where that goes. Now 2024, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw. Obviously, Ennis battled injury last year, didn't make the field a whole lot. Sione Vaki, taken in the 4th round. I mean, this guy's going to be a special teams ace, someone that can step in and run the rock. He can also catch passes out of the backfield. Sione's he's just a Swiss Army knife. Perfect pickup. Mekhi Wingo, nobody expected a 6th round pick out of Mekhi Wingo, who desperately fell in this draft. Like, I mean, it doesn't make any sense on why he fell so far. You saw what type of player he was last year until he suffered a knee injury. Christian Mahogany, again, I don't need to pump this guy up at all. You've seen what he did. His grades were incredible. Even though it was a limited amount of snaps, his grades were incredible, and you could see the type of player that is inside of him. So Giovanni Manu is the only major project out of last year's draft, 4th round pick. You can't be mad at that. You can't. Right now, the Lions have more than 8 players that have been drafted under Brad Holmes that have either made Pro Bowls or All Pros. And I don't see another team doing that. And that's why the Lions are up against it this year. They're up against it with salary cap. So even though we have the largest adjusted salary cap at $306 million this year, when you look at the players that the Lions have to re-sign or extend, the money's gone. There is no money. You know, you have to spend 90% of your salary cap over 3 seasons every year. So Brad has to spend 90% or roll it over. And he will. He's going to have to roll something over. If you want Aiden Hutchinson, if you want Kirby Joseph, and if you want Jamison Williams, just those 3 players alone eats all of this year's cap up next year in extension money. Now, it's not to say that Brad won't get something done. And we'll conversate here about the linebacker room, and maybe there's a couple of other players that deserve extensions or might be extended here soon. We just don't know yet. So with all of that, what do you say, Riley?
Oh, it's awesome, man. It's great conversation. I mean, and I do that all the time. I'll pull up the 2022 draft, 2023 draft, and just sit and look. And man, after Broderick Martin was selected, you can sit and have this conversation about should they have gone here. Man, there was one obvious player that has become a superstar, and that's Puka Nacua, but the Lions weren't in a market to draft a wide receiver. And so I think the crux of what you're kind of saying, what we're saying here is, look, man, when you draft an all-pro receiver in round 4 in Amon-Ra, it changes things, right? You're not going to get, you're just not going to get the biggest names every offseason. And again, I look at all these players that have moved as much as I'd like to have a lot of these guys in Detroit, you can kind of see why they would go to a different team. I don't want to go to a team unless they're almost guaranteeing me a starting position. Not that, you're afraid to compete for a starting spot, but a lot of these guys say, like Chicago, you can go get Drew Dahlman because you can give him this huge contract and he's not worried about starting, not starting. There's just not as much. There's not as many open spots on the Lions roster, so it's less exciting right now. But I'm sure come August and the night before Week 1 next season or this upcoming season, everyone's going to be pretty optimistic and hopeful for what the Lions will do.
Okay, so I see someone said that you're buffering. So Brandy, check your YouTube settings, and if for some reason this stream keeps going to 60 frames a second, which I don't know why it keeps doing that, then put it to 720 by 60, and that should help. And if it doesn't help, then you're gonna have to downgrade to 480. And that'll just be what it is. I'll look into it after the stream because right now it says that we're not in 60 frames, but we could be. I might be using an old stream key or something like that. And Scott, do me a favor, email me. I don't know what you're talking about, but email me, especially if it has anything to do with me. Email me for sure. So let's talk about the linebackers for just a moment. But let me zip through this chat. Let's see if I'm missing anything, if there's any questions real quick. Let's see here. Motown Mitch is Jordan Birch second right now. Oh, I know a lot of you guys are high on Jordan Birch. We're going to do members only tape this week at some point. Maybe it'll be the weekend. Where we're going to get in and look at the draft class, and we're going to review edge rushers again. We'll do defensive tackle. We'll take a look at safety. So these are members only. So if you guys haven't signed up, even if you signed up for just the cheapest tier, it'll get you into these members only. I'm probably going to transition some of that to a different platform here pretty soon because I just don't want to deal with YouTube on the members only stuff. So members only or members YouTube stuff. What's going to happen is it's going to drop down to like 99 cents or like $1.99 for all levels. There's just going to be one level, I think, is what I'm going to do. All of the other member stuff is either going to go to Substack or Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. I have to figure out which one I'm going to choose that makes the best sense for you, but also makes the best sense for the Cancer Foundation because YouTube takes 30%. All the other platforms take 5%, 3%, or 10%. So I'd much rather put more into the foundation than less, right? It makes more sense that way. Raffles are going to be up probably later on today. Those are going to be for the draft. So we're going to be doing custom Rockdown or Team Rock giveaways. We're going to do some jersey giveaways, but we're going to do it in the form of raffles this year. So I've always just given away thousands of dollars worth of stuff. This year, I'm going to do raffles and a few giveaways. Any leftover mini helmets that I have from 2024, they're all going to be given away on draft night. If I'm not at the draft, that is. I might be there day one, come back for day two. What else am I missing? Oh, if you guys are in for the first time and if you haven't subscribed yet, please smash it. Get in, get in as a subscriber at least. Hit that like button. We'll get ads turned off once we hit 75 likes. You know the drill every day. Let's talk about linebackers. So far, my question for everybody is Kelvin Sheppard winning? Is he winning the early part of free agency for his defense? And the reason why I say that, he's getting a lot of the same guys back. So is that a conversation that has been had? Is it more of a financial thing for the Lions that they're bringing back a lot of these guys on one-year deals, which Brad has seemed to execute at such a high level every single season, where these one-year deals allow him to be not only frugal for this year, but it allows him to be able to change things up next year. It seems like we're going to have maybe 15, 20, 25% of roster attrition every year, but maybe even less now as we're moving forward with some of these guys that are sticking around. I'm not saying that he's made, huge mistakes so far with the linebacker room, but I would really love to see an elevated player in this room. We really need an outside linebacker that can play at a high level. And right now it's Jack Campbell in the middle. It's Alex at the Sam, and it's Derek at the W. So that's your starting three right now. You have Malcolm for backup, which he can play pretty much all the positions now. He's been cross-trained on all of them. And I guess let's just dive into it. So right now, the Detroit Lions are returning their top 4 linebackers from last year, and then they also added a few more of the last 24 hours. So Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, and Malcolm Rodriguez are the top tier of our linebacker room right now. Now, with Barnes and Rodriguez coming off of season-ending knee injuries, the linebacker room was clearly a position of need for Brad and the Lions as far as depth, right? He needed to re-sign some of the players from last season that have familiarity within the defense, but now bringing in some outside help as well through free agency yesterday. So I kind of want to go over each player. Excuse me one sec. And then identify what needs there are left in the draft, if any, which I still think that linebacker is high on the list. But as we get through the rest of free agency, some of that stuff will be flushed out too. So under contract prior to free agency was Malcolm Rodriguez. Now, he could miss the start of the season. He is also entering his final year of his rookie contract. Is there a possible extension coming from Malcolm Rodriguez? I'd like to know what your thoughts are in the comments, obviously in the chat. Do you think that Malcolm Rodriguez deserves an extension? Do you think that he will be extended? Or do you think that this is a player that next year is going to be faced with free agency and maybe coming back on a 1-year deal? I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't even know what an extension really looks like for him yet. I think that Malcolm has been valuable. I think that his, ability to play special teams, he's kind of been, the Swiss Army knife, if you will, across the linebacker room. He's a cerebral football player. He's everything, that Brad and Dan look for in a football player. I would like to see him stick around. I wasn't as high on him last year just because I was thinking that the Lions were going to go in a different direction. But should Brad bring in another high-level linebacker this year in free agency or in the draft, I think that we're going to start to see players like that probably have to hit free agency. Also under contract this season, prior to free agency, was Alex Anzalone. Now, he is also entering his final year of his deal that was signed back in 2023, so 3 years already, flying by. He signed $18.3 million a couple of seasons ago, and now the next guy, Jack Campbell, he was under contract obviously prior to the free agency period on his rookie deal. So under contract through 2026 with the 5th-year option still available in 2027. Jack has been one of the better linebackers in the league. I don't know if you were able to look anything up, Riley, of just where he aligned, with PFF or anything else, but through the last, couple of seasons or the first 2 seasons of his career, he's been very durable. I think that he's grown tremendously. He's definitely a hitter. He's good in the run game. Suspect in pass coverage. I think he's still growing, and I think that he has a relentless work ethic that clearly shows up. He's got an aggressive style of play to him that obviously Dan covets, and I think that he shows up big time when he needs to show up. So I'm super excited to see where he's going to be in year 3. I'm just hoping that coverage ability just grows a lot this year. That's what I'm really hoping for. So thoughts on the first 3 guys there?
Yeah, I think just talking Jack Campbell, and I do have kind of his stats pulled. I mean, statistically, we're talking about a top 20 linebacker in the NFL. And I think with a guy like Jack Campbell, I always think of these guys, there's like a 3-year kind of thing here where, okay, year 1, they go in and they are trying to add to their game. They're trying to, I guess year 1, they really figure out they're learning the speed of the game, right? And then so they get all this teach tape, they get all this film of, what you are not good at, where you lack. So then year 2, they are trying to turn those weaknesses into strengths, and you see a little bit of improvement. But I think by year 3, they just figure out like, you need to figure out what you are very good at, what your skill is, what your talent is, what you do extremely well, and then just master that. So my point being, I think in year 3, I expect Jack Campbell to have his best year yet. I think he'll kind of really settle in. But yeah, his overall grade, he's 20th out of 189 linebackers. And really the only area where he's got anything but green, which is a good grade, is the pass rush grade. But you're talking about his run defense is 81.5, which is 23rd out of 189 linebackers. His coverage grade is 72.2, which is 20th. He's 22 overall in total snaps played. You mentioned his durability. So I think Jack Campbell, not just because he was a first-round draft pick, but I think the mantle is on his shoulders this year And for Anzalone, for Derek Barnes, these are guys that have been in the system. No reason to expect that they don't have some good continuity there. And I think that of the three, my biggest expectations lie on Jack Campbell going into this upcoming season.
So real quick, just let me address everyone. I see there's a few things about chats being froze up or the stream being froze. Make sure that you select your stream settings at 720 by 60, and if you have to drop the 480, it is what it is. I'll check. I can't do anything about it while we're live. There's nothing that I can do to switch or change. If it is on 60 frames a second, that could hurt your internet ability. If you have Wi-Fi, connect to it. If you don't. But what are we talking about in the chat over Tim Patrick? I haven't seen anything about Tim Patrick yet. We haven't lost him yet. I don't think he's gone anywhere yet. So if there is something popping, we should see it soon. But I haven't heard or seen anything just yet. Continuing on here with the linebacker room, and I think that's a phenomenal first couple of seasons for Jack. I mean, if he's a top 20 rated linebacker right now, I am a little bit surprised that his coverage grade is a 72. I mean, that's really good. I just know what I see on the field. It's a little bit different from the grade versus the eye test. I feel like oftentimes he gets burned a little bit. And maybe it's few and far between. I mean, he has made some really nice plays over the center of the field, but if he has to get out wide at all and cover some of these slippery, running backs, I think that's where Jack has trouble. A lot of linebackers have trouble, but I just want to see it continue to improve for him because I think sky's the limit for this guy. It was a perfect pick by Brad Holmes at 18 to be able to have that fifth year of control and to make sure that this player can develop. So free agency pickups. Now, the Lions have only added one linebacker through free agency that was outside of the halls here of Allen Park, and that is Grant Stewart. So 26-year-old Stewart was a 2021 7th-round pick of the Buccaneers. He played primarily on special teams as a rookie, and then he was traded to the Colts in 2022, where he also mostly played special teams in Indianapolis. He was chosen as a special teams captain. We know that Brad and Dan love captains, whether it's from college or other. They love to see these guys that are leaders. And the more leaders you can get in a room, obviously the better off you're going to be. You don't have to worry about somebody's work ethic. But Stewart can also contribute on defense. He had a career year in 2024. If you could say that for him, it was his best year so far in the NFL. He started 5 games and logged a career high in total tackles, 40, and solo tackles, 25. And he didn't, during a start against the Miami Dolphins, 19 tackles. Absolutely fantastic game for him. 1 tackle for loss in that game. But that is the type of player that the Lions are bringing in. Someone that obviously had a great year last year when he stepped in. I can't remember who it was that got injured for the Dolphins, but he stepped in for, might have been Mosley or something. He stepped in. It played well for what he was asked to do. Now, the Lions obviously want more depth at linebacker. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, as you mentioned earlier, this kind of seems like that one-for-one trade-off. A leader, a guy that plays special teams, a special teams ace on other teams, and now coming to the Detroit Lions with a lot of room for improvement still left to be seen in this guy. They got this guy, I think fairly inexpensively. I think that this is going to bolster Dave Phipps' special team room, and he'll be a significant contributor, I think, early. Dave Phipps was extremely excited about this. He said, number 41's a hair-on-fire player. This guy's relentless. He's got a great story. I read it this summer. There's a great article about him, but just a great player, and I have a lot of respect for him. The fact that he read his story last summer tells you that the Lions are constantly looking. They're constantly evaluating. They're constantly scouting, which is exactly what happens all throughout the NFL. But it should make you feel at least a little bit more comfortable that these guys aren't just, willy-nilly selections. It's not like Brad's just throwing darts at a dartboard and say, okay, Lopez is cool, or, hey, Stewart, that sounds good. No, he's got these guys pegged. He knows exactly who these players are, and he's bringing them in for a reason. Another quote about Stewart came from the Indianapolis Colts fan base, where they said the Lions aren't getting a starting caliber linebacker, but Stewart can spot start and play in rotational situational roles for the defense. He's also a motor that won't stop until the play is made. However, look for the Lions to undoubtedly use him on special teams, as it's his bread and butter. So I'm excited to see what he has. I haven't been able to dive into any tape on him just yet, so I can't give you my personal opinion on it. Not that it matters, but I will later on today finally have some time to sit down and go through it. Your thought on the signing?
Yeah, I think you said it very well, man. This isn't Brad Holmes just like, oh man, hey Dan, what should we do, man? Just close your eyes. We're gonna throw a dart. Roy Lopez, call him up. Let's get him. They're very deliberate. It may seem like that to us because they're not names that we necessarily had on the radar. Most fans, I would say, but it makes sense, man. If I always go back to, if I told you 2 years ago or 3 years ago, hey man, after 2024, they go 15-2, and then the guys that they are signing are, you're getting Mr. Irrelevant from the Colts, but it's a guy that's proven excels in the special teams role. You're like, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's a guy you signed to a 15-win team.
It's exactly right. I mean, it's not so much that, you're just throwing darts, like I said, but you've seen the guy do it, and you've seen him do it over the last couple of seasons.
It's proven. So now that's a hell of a lot more valuable than if you hit on a 6th or 7th round draft pick. That's house money.
Exactly, because you're getting a very cheap option for a few years.
Yep. Or you go sign a guy that was a 6th or 7th round draft pick, so you're not having to pay him a ton necessarily, but I mean, relatively speaking, but you're getting somebody that has proven that they can do it. Like, why would Grant Stewart come to Detroit and not have a good year outside of, health, right? There's no reason this guy would come to Detroit and underperform.
Well, I think he's going to perform at exactly what he is, and right now it's a special teams player that's going to fill depth. And quite honestly, I think that the moves that Brad is making right now is depth. And you heard him say it last year. You heard him say it the year before that. You heard Dan say, we're going to need all 69 guys. I hope he doesn't say that again this year. But depth is the most important thing on a team. You have your starters, you have your stars like every other team, but you are only as good as the guy behind you. If the guy behind you can't come in and fill in when you twisted an ankle on a play and have to come out for a few snaps, and then they can attack you at that position because you're a weakness, well, that's how teams can score quickly. So if your depth can rise to the occasion and fill in, whether it's 3 snaps or 30, and you don't see this huge drop off in play, you're winning. And that's what we saw last season from the Lions. Now, from the 20-20, it seemed like the Lions gave up a lot of yards, primarily when we had big leads. So I don't really care about that. When we got into the red zone, we started to shut teams down. As the defense started to lose player after player after player, and you get into week 10, and you've got all this roster attrition happening, you did see a little bit of a drop-off in play, but not much. Like, you still had a team that was shutting teams out. 4 games last year that teams were held without a touchdown. Who does that? Nobody. Because nobody else did it but the Lions last year. So I'm confident with the guys that we had on the team last year. If they're all back and they're all healthy, we can run it back. But that doesn't mean we don't need to amplify or elevate a couple of positions on this squad. You have to do it every year. You have to get better. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I think Brad will get us better here in short order, especially in the draft. So the next part of the linebacker room here is the recent signings or re-signings. So extension, obviously, do outside linebacker Derek Barnes. Now, his 2024 stats were minimal because he was injured after week 3 or in week 3. So he played 3 games, 10 tackles, 1 pass defense. Now he signed a 3-year deal worth up to $25 million. And with the Lions, obviously before the start of free agency, getting this deal done was important. I think that this week, he needed this, right? The Lions needed this. I think that it speaks more volumes to the player that's progressed and grown under a system. It makes sense. Again, I've never been high on Derek Barnes, but I see the value, and I see the what could be production out of Derek Barnes. There's a big difference between what the Lions do and what other teams do. And I want to make sure that we as fans understand that. A 4-3 defense is so much different than a 3-4. You guys know that. So you're not talking about speed at, outside linebackers that are rushing the quarterback like a 3-4. These are guys that are dropping into coverage. These are guys that are slamming the box shut, in the run game. They're not guys that are generally going to be pass rushers. These are guys that are used in a multifaceted 4-3 defensive scheme that have to do a little bit more than just cover and attack. So that there's a big difference here, right? And that needs to be said, because I think a lot of people think that so many different players can come and just play for the Lions. Well, they can't, because they don't fit the scheme. And it just makes sense to obviously keep players that fit the scheme. The Lions also re-signed outside linebacker Ezekiel Turner to a one-year deal. So 12 tackles last year, half a sack, 3 quarterback hits. Look, I love the guy's energy. And I do think that he could be a little bit more versatile off the outside of the defense, a little bit more off-ball linebacker. I do think that he can come up and play on the line a little bit as a pass rusher if needed, depending on what kind of, defensive scheme you're going to run that day. But he definitely can be used in situational opportunities to get after the passer, utilizing his speed. However, he was more of a special team standout in 2024. And so the Lions, re-signed him at the start of free agency to a one-year deal. He was originally signed with the Lions back in November when the Lions were under attack by injuries. They're pulling guys from anywhere they could. Turner gave the Lions versatility immediately. I think that he popped off, the page on day one, but then things kind of trailed off for him a little bit. He helped stem the loss of Alex Anzalone almost immediately. And then obviously when Alex came back from his broken forearm, obviously we see the type of play that we were missing. But another midseason signing last year that the Lions scout team had available, right? They knew who he was, they knew where he was, and they knew where to get him. I'm not as high on his run defense. That's probably the biggest knock I have on the guy. I think that he makes poor decisions in the run game, but more importantly, he bites on almost every play action play, especially in the RPO, but he just bites way too hard. He is too quick to crash. I think that he needs to play with a little bit more patience. Doesn't mean that the Lions coaching staff cannot take this guy, reshape and remold him a little bit in a full offseason program in Allen Park. So I'm expecting more from him this year, but right now he's nothing but a depth signing and a camp guy. Those first two guys, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, man, not much to add. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head with both of them. And it's going to come down to coaching, right? I mean, that's the other thing too, is I always keep coming back to that. I'm like, man, this team's got a new offensive coordinator. It's got a new defensive coordinator, but they're guys that have coached in the team or in the organization before. So that gives me some confidence too. But as far as those players, I think you kind of encapsulated it really, really well. I know there's some people in the comments here that are not too optimistic about these guys. But again, we're talking about your depth pieces. Ideally, they're not starting and playing a lot of snaps.
Yeah, I see that, there's some people talking about how many spots we have left. And I'm glad that everyone's recognizing that now. So it's anywhere from, 10 or 11 on the top 69, or some of them are saying there's 6 or 7 spots, or maybe even 5 for the top 53. And that's exactly what I was talking about last night, that, everyone's saying, why aren't we doing something? Why aren't we bringing in all these players? There's no spots to be had. I mean, there's a few, right? The Lions are going to probably bring in 12 UDFAs. They're going to bring in at least 6 rookies. That's 18. We have 60 signed now, I think. 50 to 59, whatever the number was last night changed. We just let a few players go.
I think
so there's just not a lot of room. There's just not. Your roster is finally getting to a point where what you have is pretty good. They will get better. We know that at the end of cut day, at the end of August, Brad will bring in a player or two. He does it every year. I guarantee you he'll bring in somebody this year again. All right, inside linebacker Anthony Pittman. He was re-signed. 2024 stats, not great. 2 tackles, 1 forced fumble. But he was signed off of Jacksonville's practice squad in mid-December last year. And thankfully, he was available, right? This is a player that was with us for a couple of seasons. And then obviously he left to Jacksonville. And then he came back because, we had injuries and we had to get somebody. Why not bring a guy back that has history with the coaching staff? So he's still one of the better special teams players in the NFL, I feel. Like, I think he does pretty well there. I mean, he may not be an ace, but I think, again, when you add these guys, you're looking at 3 teams. You got offense, defense, and special teams. And all 3 phases have to have good football players. And with the new rules, and maybe even more new rules again this year with the kickoff, you need guys that can be versatile. So he was re-signed again, like I said, at the start of free agency on a 1-year deal, adding depth to the linebacker core. Look, it's going to be, like they said last season in the cornerback room, I think it's going to be a bloodbath in this linebacker room. I think that they're going to go heavy here, even continuing through free agency, the draft, and during the summer to bring guys in to make this a really good competition. Futures deal was signed by Abraham Beauplan. Now, he joined the Lions on August 11th last year after beginning his career with the Vikings as an undrafted free agent in 2023. He's a work in progress, right? He's still a guy that flashes at times. He needs some more work. I think that Dan Campbell, really loves this dude's toughness and his competitive spirit, which it does show up. It definitely shows up when he's in the game, which has been few and far between. But we don't know what we don't know yet about Beauplan. But I think that being a good camp body, more competition right now, I think that we see how he progresses in year 2. And if he can stick or if he doesn't stick. I mean, right now it's just a camp body. Deron Gilbert, kind of the same thing. Again, no stats for either of these guys, Beauplan or Gilbert last year. This is purely a practice squad camp body signing at this time, but good competition. Now, not under contract, and guys that have already left, Mitchell Lagoud. So he was just allowed to hit free agency. Exclusive rights free agent Trevor Nowaski, who was just re-signed, right?
Believe so, yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this. It's just not popping up. I don't know why everything is so darn slow. So anyway, he was re-signed. But he was signed back to the roster after training camp and was asked to step into a bigger role at linebacker due to injury. He showed off his versatility in production last season. I thought that he did very well. He had 23 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 quarterback hit, 1 interception, 1 pass defense. That's a really good season for a guy that doesn't get a ton of snaps. And then he was asked to play a ton of snaps. So I'm more high on Trevor Nowaski than I am not. When you look at what the Lions have right now, which is, I got to move Trevor to under contract. Right now I got him not under contract. Let me put him under contract.
You were high on Nowaski even from seeing him in camp last year, right?
1,000%.
Yeah, I remember going back and listening to old shows and being like,
he was signed after training camp last year, but watching him play, look, I expected it to be really good in special teams last year, I think is what my comment was. Just knowing, what he was able to do in previous years and watching him grow, I think that it kind of gave me an idea he was going to be good. At least, if anything, he's a good quality depth signing. Ben Nyman, the other one, that's a guy that I thought was going to be able to come in and just do the darn thing. I mean, this guy is known as a special teamer. He is known, to be a high motor type of guy. But Ben Nyman played in every game last season. He had 4 starts with the Lions. He had to shuffle around, at linebacker quite a bit due to injury. He was kind of moving all over the place. But Nyman's a 7-year vet who can play a number of different positions and roles. Obviously, as a linebacker, I don't think he's been re-signed yet. I haven't seen any news on him. So I'll be interested to see what they do. Maybe he wants too much money. But I do like Nyman. I think that his demeanor, his experience, I think everything about him is great. He stepped up in a big way last year with all the injuries that the Lions suffered. He was put into a position of just help, do what you can. Yeah, and I think, between him and Nowaski, they were getting a lot of snaps together. I think they held it down, as good as any other linebacker room out there could have in that situation when you've just, everyone around you is like second and third string, and what are you going to do? You've got to do what you can do. And they played well. 15 games. We won. And a lot of that came off the backs of all these players that we just mentioned. And there's no reason why they can't be better in another year together. So be interesting to see if Nyman comes back. But right now, I'm glad to see that Trevor Nowaski, Deron Gilbert, Abraham Beauplan, Anthony Pittman, Ezekiel Turner, Derek Barnes, obviously Malcolm Rodriguez, Grant Stewart, Alex Anzalone, and Jack Campbell rounds out your linebacker core right now. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is 10 guys right now in the linebacker room. I expect that to grow to at least 12 or 13 before camp. Lastly here, released, Jalen Reeves-Maben was made official yesterday of his release. This is a weird one for me. Like, why did we extend the guy and everyone was all high on him last year? And I'm like, nah. Like, this is not a guy that I would have extended. This is not a guy that I would have kept around. Leader, captain, good on special teams, but just I wouldn't have invested that much into him last year. I would have tried to find somebody different. Obviously, injuries were a problem for him last year too. He suffered that neck injury that became a problem throughout most of the season. Came back in the very end of the season for the playoffs and did what he could, to help out the team. But wish him the best moving forward. I just wasn't as high on him. I never really was. I really never gravitated to Jalen Reeves-Maben. Good dude, right? Solid guy. Just as a football player, he just didn't move the needle for me. So wrap up your final thoughts here in the linebacker room. Where do you think we're headed?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a position that, I mean, I guess I just ask you, do you anticipate that they draft a linebacker here in April?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's situationally dependent, right? So if you're at 28 and the Giants or the Browns or, another team is wanting to move up into the first round, then it may not be a linebacker that we take first, because I think that if you're looking for a game-changing linebacker, that's going to happen in the first round, early into the second round. However, now that I'm looking at this roster, not to give away all my nuggets, but now that I'm looking at this roster, you've already identified your starters. Alex Anzalone will be healthy to start the season. Jack Campbell's going to be healthy to start the season. Derek Barnes is supposed to be healthy to start the season. Those are your three starters. Your high-level backups are Malcolm Rodriguez and Grant Stewart. So that's already 5. You only have room for about one more on the 53. If the Lions carry 6 into this year's roster, I would be surprised if they went 7. But I think 6 is probably the max.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my question, even with the magnifying glass on it, is are you comfortable with Rodriguez coming off the ACL and Stewart being your backup spots? Because I'm comfortable with the starters, and I love Rodrigo there, but you're accounting for him coming off of injury. So yeah, I don't know. You are way more knowledgeable on these guys coming into the draft than I am. So is there a linebacker that they will target? Remains to be seen, but
yeah, so let's flush it out for a second. So if we have the top 3 that are healthy and available, Alex, Jack, and Derek Barnes, those are your 3 starters. Malcolm is probably going to miss the beginning of the year, so let's just say he ends up being placed on, I don't know. I don't think they'll IR him, but they'll probably keep him on the 53 if he's close, like they've done in the past with other players. But let's just say, for all intents and purposes, I don't think you can NFI him. Let's just say he's thrown on IR. And so he's gone for the first 4 weeks. So then you definitely need another backup. Well, they have Grant Stewart to slide in, so that position is taken care of. So you still need at least 2 more, right? If I remember correctly, let me just pull up my list from last year. Lions had 6. They had Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez, Germ, and Ben Nyman. So right now I can say Alex, Jack, Derek, they're in. Malcolm may not be in right away because of the injury if he can't make it back. But Jalen Reeves-Maben, that's a direct swap out for Grant Stewart. So to be Alex, Jack, Derek, Grant, and now we've got to make up for Ben Nyman or Malcolm Rodriguez. Well, I think Trevor Nowaski has a high likelihood of making this 53. So really,
you might be set.
You might be set. at linebacker, which means if they grab a linebacker in the draft, then they're not set with Turner, Pittman, or Beauplan or Gilbert making this roster, and it's going to be a dogfight for that 6th spot, or they might carry 7.
Yep.
Be interesting to see what happens, but as we get closer, this is why the mock drafts change so much for me, because as I start to analyze the roster and try to flush it out and figure out, well, what did you do last year? What did you do the year before? Mm-hmm. How many players do we have that truly can play at a high level? Where's the roster going to? I think linebacker room's set. So linebacker for me, which I thought was going to be a high likelihood, may not be right now. And so that also depends on what we do with the edge position. Still in free agency. There's still talk of Zadarius Smith, and there's still talk that the Lions are trying to work something out with one of these free agents that are available right now. And I would say those rumors are just that, just rumors. All right, what do you have up next? And of course, I would love to know what you guys think about the roster right now in the linebacker room. If you had a choice right now to grab a linebacker in this draft, let's just say, end of the 2nd round, pick 60, if we still have it, are you taking a linebacker that you're going to throw into camp and let them compete? I guess the bigger question that should be asked is Malcolm Rodriguez and Alex Anzalone going to get an extension? And see, that's the last fold to this for me. When you look at the contracts for this room, this looks identical to the cornerback room a season ago. Mm-hmm. You don't have anybody under contract for 2023 or 2024 in the cornerback room, the DB room. They went out in the draft and made sure that they grabbed a couple of players. They also grabbed a couple of players in free agency, one with Amik Robertson that had 2 seasons under contract. And then this year, we just locked up a guy for 3 seasons. So the cornerback room was a deficiency a couple of seasons ago to where now you've got guys signed for multiple seasons. In the linebacker room, it's starting to look like to me, everyone's on a 1-year deal except for Derek Barnes and Jack Campbell. That's it. Everyone else is on a 1-year deal. So are they going to work something out with Alex this year? Or is he hitting the road next year? Same thing with Malcolm. So that's where I do believe a linebacker makes sense in the draft.
Yep.
You
and
need
it makes
that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's a good spot to be in if you're Brad Holmes. So are we extending Rodrigo? Are we extending Anzalone? Well, let's see how they play this upcoming year. You're not beholden to anything. You don't have to, his hands aren't strapped. So I don't know. I felt like last year, this time, I was pretty sure that round 1 was going to be a defensive back. This year, man, I don't know. I mean, the easy answer is edge, but I guess, not to trail off, but there's always like 80 thoughts going on in my mind. Does Zeitler leaving, does that make an offensive line position a bigger need to draft? Because I think what you've just described, our linebacker room is pretty set. And you're right. It's a great analogy. I hadn't put the two together, but this year's linebacker room is last year's defensive back room as far as contracts and how they're set up. So which way does he go round 1? Are you getting somebody on the offensive line, or are you getting somebody on the defensive line? I do feel like it'll be one of those two.
Yeah, man, I can't believe it's 9:30 already. I forgot we started late. Let me get ads turned off. We're only a few likes away. We got about 150 people in. Let's smash that like button. We're going to turn ads off for the rest of the show. I know ads they can suck. All right. What else do we have for news here? Let's transition to a little bit of NFL news. We'll come back to the Lions here in just a moment, but is there anything that you had this morning that is really pressing, or anything that you'd really like to talk about as far as what's popping in the NFL?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of getting tired of all the good news coming out of Minnesota. Harrison Smith, their longtime Pro Bowl safety, it was kind of up in the air. Is he going to run it back, taking it year by year? Last night, not too long after we got done with the stream yesterday, I saw Ian Rappaport send out a tweet. So when we were doing the show the other day, Will, and on Tuesday with Eric, and then we saw the Vikings make 3-4 moves, you were quick to point out, like on paper at least, man, this defense in Minnesota looks pretty damn good, and I agree with you. They're loaded. So now Harrison Smith, he signs a 1-year deal. He's returning for season number 14, and maybe they're doing it $1 million for every year he's played, but they are giving him a $14 million contract. 10.25 of that is guaranteed. At age 36, Smith is still playing at a high level and can now add to his Hall of Fame resume. So I guess question for you, Will, is do the Vikings have the best defense in the NFC North as it stands today?
All right, so let me be clear on this. Every year I bring up the paper tiger test, and that's what this is right now. It is paper, right? So we have all these giant tigers right now on this piece of paper. They were just signed to all of these teams, the Bears, the Vikings, not so much the Packers or the Lions, but it's the paper tiger test. So until we see these guys on the field and see how they gel together, see what this defense looks like, this is an incredible defense that they've put together once again in Minnesota. But as we seen last season, you may have had one of the better defenses in the league, but you still have to stop Jahmyr Gibbs, and you still have to stop Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you still have to stop Jameson Williams. So I don't care who you get, you still have to stop us. And that is the hardest thing for any team to do. Now, they're going to make it difficult. If we don't beef up our offensive line a little bit this year, players like Javon Hargrave and Will Fries and Jonathan Allen, not Will Fries, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, and Harrison Smith,
Aaron Murphy.
Yeah, these guys can make your day a living nightmare. So they got really big up in the middle there. And you know what that is? That is a direct response to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
That is a direct response to the Detroit Lions offensive line. It's exactly what it is. And I will say this about Brad Holmes. If there's one thing that I could ask him to tweak, and maybe he's doing this in a way that I don't understand, but teams like Minnesota, they got it. They get it. They looked at, okay, how do we win our division? I don't need to beat everybody in the NFL. I just need to win our division. Because if you can be the number one seed in your division, you're going to get a home playoff game. You're going to be in the playoffs.
Yep.
So for me, if as a GM, I would focus on my division first. Where did we have trouble last year? Well, in both games, the offensive line did not do well against the Bears and the Vikings. So I would say that a focus should be spent there on making sure that doesn't happen again in 2025. So far, haven't seen anything transition yet to make sure that we're combating what they're doing. Okay. Frank Ragnow, love the dude to death. Think he's awesome. Love his channel. And he's just a great guy. I think he's a great football player. He's been one of the best centers in the league the entire time he's been in the league. Does not give up sacks, doesn't give up a ton of pressures. So he's fine. But at what point are you going to have that honest conversation and say, like, dude, if those injuries creep up on you in 2025, we're screwed. We can't be without a center that plays to the level of Ragnow. You have to. And I know that Brad Holmes said it, and this is a direct contradiction, I guess, or maybe not a contradiction, but I don't agree with Brad on this part. You do need to have your center waiting. And I think that this is the year that you have to have your center waiting. Because if you don't, I'm sorry, Graham Glasgow, even though he can fill in at center, and I do appreciate that, I don't think that he's the long-term answer. So at what point are we going to have that center waiting to take Ragnow's spot that can also play guard? I think that it has to happen. Taylor Decker, like, either we need to trade him or we need to figure out a way that he's not going to give up so many pressures and sacks. Last 2 seasons, I think he's averaged 8 sacks a season. It's too much. And that's your blind side to Jared Goff. And if you notice last year, Jared got his ass kicked a few times by the blind side. If Jared goes down, season's tanked. I have no faith in Hendon Hooker to be able to do anything. And I have no idea who Jake Fromm from State Farm is going to be this year, if he's going to be a viable third option. So that blind side to me is the most important side on the offensive line. Either you're going to start shading Decker with a tight end, right? Or you're going to put in, or you're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs picking up some blocking, assignments. But I still don't like Jahmyr Gibbs in that position. He's not going to be able to take on these giant edge rushers or defensive tackles. That's just not smart, and the Vikings love to stunt and twist, and that's where the confusion happens. So for me, they have to figure out that left guard spot. If that's Mahogany, great. But I'm more worried about the left side of the offensive line this year, especially with what I'm seeing here with the Vikings. So to answer your question, it's paper tiger test. Vikings have a phenomenal defense on paper. They had a phenomenal defense last year. So if they're rolling with the same scheme and they're rolling with the same thing they did last year, they just improved big time.
Yep. Yeah. Continuity. Yeah. They're running it back. They got their coordinators back. They got head coach back, and they're going to be inserting JJ McCarthy by all indications. And, people say, well, McCarthy's not, you don't need him to be the best quarterback in the NFL. Minnesota has me concerned, but I think that everything you said, that actually sounds like a great show, to kind of just go through and say, how do you win this division again? I think you make a great point too, because I remember all those years where, it's like, okay, I remember when they took Lake and Tomlinson, it's like, well, you got to keep Stafford healthy. And then it's, hey, well, they're taking Jeff Okudah. Well, we could have used another good corner opposite Slay all these years playing against Aaron Rodgers and all that kind of stuff, So you've got to be very specific to the division. And I agree with you. I think Minnesota and Chicago, the moves that they've made have clearly been with the Lions in mind. Ben Johnson getting to Chicago, he said as much, right? He said, I know what it takes to play in and win this division. So it adds to the competition, man. This is like, it's heating up. This is going to be fun either way we go about it. So Harrison Smith back with the Vikings.
Yeah. So real quick on JJ McCarthy, now I would love to know from everybody, what is your thought on JJ McCarthy in his first season? So this is a guy that didn't obviously get a lot of time last year. He was injured, so he didn't have any time really. Do you think that he's going to have a typical rookie season? Now, I know a lot of you are Lions fans, U of M fans. So I get it. You're probably going to be a little bit more high on JJ McCarthy than what your average NFL fan would be. I would say from a place of analysis, I think that he's going to have an average season. I think that he has a lot to learn. His downfield presence is not as good as what I think a lot of people thought it would be. Yeah, he's got some mobile feet, but first and second down, I think he's okay. He was not asked to throw the ball a whole lot on third and fourth down last year or 2 years ago. So I think that that's going to be the struggle for JJ in the beginning, is just that being able to identify the progressions and being able to do something a little bit more consistent on third down. And that's where, yeah, the Lions may have an opportunity on the offensive side of the football for Minnesota that I think the games are more won for the Lions on the defensive side of the ball against Minnesota, especially going up against their defense. Does that make sense? Like, I think that we'll be able to handle JJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he's going to be able to put up a ton of points on us. But I also feel like with this defense that the Vikings have put together, yeah, we may not have these big 30, 40-point games anymore against the Vikings. It's going to be a dogfight.
And with that defense, what's the number you always say? If you hold your opponents to 20 or less, you probably are going to win. I feel confident that the Vikings are going to be able to do that defensively a lot. So it'll be interesting to see when those games are against the Lions. It seems like they usually have a game, last game of the regular season is always a division game. It was last year. And what kind of quarterback do we get at that time with McCarthy? There might be a learning curve. I don't know. I think I'm a little more optimistic on JJ than it sounds like that you are, and some of the others. I don't know. I worry. Maybe it's just because Thor loves him so much too that I'm like, man, it's what are they seeing? But I know McCarthy's an accurate thrower of the football, and I just know that they don't need him to be heroic in any ways, and that might be good enough to get him 12, 13 wins. And so
it's hard not to want to be the hero, right? A couple of good comments by, let's see, Michael Lukey says, I think that McCarthy is really going to struggle in his first year, and if he doesn't click with Justin Jefferson right away, things could get ugly. That's a good point. We know that JJ loves to have the football. They got two JJs on the.
I was going to say which one.
Team now, right? Let's see. Brett Lighton says when JJ was needed to make a big play or a big throw, he usually made it. He just wasn't asked often. He has great upside. So we kind of have both takes. I can't say that I watched a ton of Michigan tape with JJ just during the draft process. I thought that JJ was taken exactly where he should be. But as a developmental quarterback, I don't think that you're going to walk away from a talent. You're going to be able to develop him. The question is, how much developing was he able to get done, with the injury last year? And how much was he able to learn from a guy like Sam Darnold? I mean, he was able to see that you can connect with players if, you have the experience. But Sam Darnold had experience. JJ's starting fresh. So I think that is the one upside the Lions have right now is just... we have to get after JJ. We have to rattle this dude. Big shout out this morning to Trace. Obviously, she's not with us this morning. I know she's attending to family matters. Just want to wish her sister well. So our thoughts are with you this morning, Trace, and your sister. Make sure everything is going well, and always appreciate you being part of the Rockdown Mods team. So, all right, what's next? What else do you have for NFL news?
Hey, do we have I should have it on cue here. Can I get the link to your blog post?
Which one?
Or so to oh gosh, what is it called? Oh my gosh, what is it called? The not a specific post, but just where you're posting all of your articles. I want to get that put up into the chat.
Oh, I could throw it in the chat. There you go.
Perfect.
Oh, hey, that's the wrong one. Hold on. Let me remove that. Yeah, and that will change because once my domain is added, which I just haven't done yet, I just need to do it. It'll be DetroitFootballJournal.com. So yeah, that's all up in there. What did you have next on NFL news?
Yeah, let me get this pulled up here. It was interesting yesterday. You did a video that I watched live and then I rewatched it last night. And I always think, because you're talking about, the Chiefs did all this restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
And then Josh Allen comes out and has a whole deal where he says, I didn't feel like I was leaving money on the table, where he was leaving $5+ million on the table. And people always say, man, what's the difference between $325 million or $330 million? And my answer is always $5 million. That's still a lot of money. But you made a great point, and I just wanted to bring it up again. I don't know who in the chat was able to catch that if you didn't go watch it when we're done here today. But, Will, you made comments and brought up the idea that should Amon-Ra, where he's talking about, man, the Bears are getting all these guys, they're signing all these. Is it incumbent on a player to maybe go and ask to have a contract restructured? Does the team need to take that initiative? It's like, if you never ask for a raise, you're never going to get one. Is it the player's responsibility? Is it the agent's responsibility? Is it the team's responsibility? I don't know if you had any thoughts kind of going back on that. The video was great, but it gave me some pause to kind of stop and think about it. Because my initial thought was, no, Amon-Ra is a young player. Make every last penny you can. But when I watched it, I thought there is some sense to this, where if you are wanting to have the best possible team, do you go in and maybe ask for a restructure of your deal, take a little bit more money, and have a little bit more to spread around?
Yeah. So the whole thought of this yesterday, and I probably wasn't as clear as I needed to be in the video, but I wasn't trying to attack Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jared Goff at all. That wasn't the focus. It was, I seen the news, obviously, that the Chiefs were doing some restructuring with defensive tackle Jones and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And they put up $49 million just by restructuring those two deals. And so I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't care where the Chiefs were before that. I don't care how much cap space they had. They already had a good team, right? They've got, picks that they're going to be able to draft this year. They're going to make the team better. And the Chiefs have largely built through the draft. When you look at their team, it is mostly drafted football players. So I see this news that breaks that they reorganize these contracts. They throw $49 million on the table for the Chiefs to do something with.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, especially when you look at the fact that the Lions said roughly the same amount to start free agency. And so then I saw St. Brown all pissed off, right? And then you see Lions fans getting angry. And, I made the analogy, or I guess the commonality that, well, did St. Brown get everybody all agitated? Because he's kind of saying that the Bears have unlimited money and they're able to do whatever they want. It seems like every year. Okay. But they're buying their team. They're not doing it through the draft. We've kicked the snot out of the Bears. We've had a couple of games that were really close. We lost one on Thanksgiving. But I think that we're at a different, I guess, angle, or a different, how do I want to say it? We're at a different,
the DNA, I guess, is just different.
like crossroads than what the Bears are.
Yeah.
Like our roster is much better than theirs. But if you really think that you need to go spend $30-40 million on a player to bring in, then how are you going to do that, Amon-Ra? How are you going to do it?
Exactly.
There's only one way. So if you don't want J-Mo on the team next year, if you don't want Aiden Hutchinson to stick around, if you think that Kirby is going to get too much money, and then, oh, by the way, if you don't want to sign all of your guys back from 2023, then I guess keep your money and shut the hell up and go play football. Otherwise, if you feel like the Lions are going to be in trouble and they can't keep all these guys, and you want to go out and sign some big name free agents, then maybe you need to go back and do a restructure. That's all I was really trying to say. It wasn't so much blaming him. I think that these players deserve every bit of money that they get. I was never high on the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract. I thought it was way too much money. I love what he's all about. I mean, I think that he fits everything that Brad and Dan have tried to build in Detroit, just like Penei Sewell. He fits everything they've tried to build. The problem for me is you handed out a huge contract when you probably could have let him play for another year. You could have franchise tagged him. You could have played that whole game, but Brad doesn't want to do that. He wants to take care of his people, wants to take care of his guys. But now the question remains, if you really feel that you are spurned by the Bears and they can just go out and buy all these players, just like the Vikings just did, then I think you and Jared need to go have a conversation about, in Penei, legacy or money. But I'll tell you right now, you bring a Super Bowl to Detroit, you will get every bit of money that you ever need just from doing that. Because the sponsorships and everything else that you're going to get from doing that, every Detroit brand in the world is going to want to be part of your brand. Tom Brady didn't make his money in the NFL. He made like $20 million a year on average until the last couple of seasons that he played in the NFL. He finally got like a max deal, I think it was in 2019 with the Bucs. You know where he made his money? He made his money from all the ad deals and all the sponsorships and, all the brand deals that were put together because he was winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. That's where you make your money in the NFL. It is not from these contracts. So you go win a Super Bowl and bring it to Detroit, you'll never worry about money. And that $30 million a year will be peanuts compared to what you're getting. And like I said, no one's going to remember the $120 million deal you got. They're going to remember that you didn't bring a Super Bowl to Detroit if it doesn't happen. That's what they're going to remember. I mean, look at Kelvin Johnson. Look at Matthew Stafford. Look at Barry Sanders. Barry didn't break the bank always with contracts, but Matthew Stafford did. Kelvin Johnson did. We didn't win any Super Bowls from that. Didn't even come close. Now, we remember these guys because they were damn good football players. They're some of the best in the NFL. And Calvin Johnson will be remembered forever because of what he did in Detroit. But what about all the other players that have played in Detroit? How many can you name right now that had really big deals I honestly couldn't name any of them
Mhm.
outside of the guys I just mentioned. But Barry didn't have big deals. I can't name any of them because their deals don't matter to me. The wins and the losses and the Super Bowls and the playoffs, that's what matter. I can remember that stuff. So that's where I was with that.
Yeah, it's all good thoughts, man. It gets you, it gets you thinking, and then you're like, is he just, on a podcast and, just shooting the breeze and just kind of putting it out there? I mean, it's a human thought. It's like, man, how are these guys getting all this money? But you see, Mr. Thomas in the comments saying, speaking from a Amon Ross standpoint, saying, no, I want a Super Bowl team now in all caps, not later, So he says, I see Amon Ross point. So I guess that asks the question then is this a Super Bowl contending roster? I would say that it is. Even the roster that's in construction now, it is. So we kind of started the show today going through that, the room. It's like, well, yeah, you go sign all these starter players and it sounds and looks good and feels good and it brings optimism, but there's just not as many starting spots open in Detroit, especially counting for.
Yeah, and it's not so much that I'm even asking, or saying that they need to take less money. Like, that's not even the case, because the question is this: is Sheila Hamp willing to spend the money? Was St. Brown saying that these teams have all this money to spend because their ownership is willing to spend the money? Because if that's the problem, if the Ford family is not willing to spend every ounce of dollars that they have available to them, well, that could be a problem. So are we putting unintended blame on the top of Brad Holmes' head that the Lions aren't out there doing all these moves and making all these waves because Brad's not making them? Or does Brad have full autonomy with this salary cap and maybe he's being restricted a little bit to not spend all of that money right now? And I guess furthermore, I would say this: if you wanted to convert, just like Patrick Mahomes, he converted $34.3 million in 2025 comp into a signing bonus. So now you take that signing bonus and you can kick it 5 years down the road. So you just essentially converted $6 million a year, to the cap. That just opened up a ton of money this year. Same thing with Chris Jones. He converted $27.5 million into a signing bonus, adding one more void year to his contract. So again, that means that the ownership is going to have to step up with a big check. That's the problem, I think, that people aren't understanding, is now when you do a signing bonus, that is direct money coming out of your kitty, and it does hit the cap, but it's not paid over time. It's right now. So these are all questions that can be, we could talk about it forever. But at the end of the day, if St. Brown feels like these teams have unlimited money, it's because of people like Patrick Mahomes, players like Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones saw the value in making sure that their team did have some money to spend and making sure that they could bring in some players. What did they do yesterday? So they ended up putting a 1 year refusal on Najee Johnson. They assigned another right of refusal tender on Jack Cochran. And I mean, there's a boatload of moves in here. They signed Trey Smith to a $23 million franchise tag. They signed Nick Bolton to a 3-year, $45 million deal. They got Marquise Brown signed to a 1-year, $7 million deal. They re-signed or signed Elijah Mitchell. Brought back a long snapper, whoopie-de-doo. Christian Fulton, cornerback. They signed him to a $20 million deal. And I'm sure that there's more to come. But at the end of the day, I think that this is just about what you want, legacy or money. Yep. That's it.
Yep. And your point being not, hey, well, okay, then go take less money, but it's just the willingness to be creative in building the roster and seeing how it all looks. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see kind of where things look. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't they used to have the draft and then free agency? How many years ago did they switch it? Because now you can go sign guys and then you can draft players in need at that point and have a little bit better of an idea. Although, like I said earlier, I still don't know which direction the Lions will go with round one. You could sit and have an argument and say, well, now they've got even more reason to trade up. You can make an argument. Some team's going to come in and they're going to make an offer to trade back. That the Lions will capitalize on. So it's roster roulette, man. This is the time of the off season where it's just constant putting the puzzle together. But the good thing is the Lions I feel like they've got a starter locked in at every position as of today for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, if we run down, the list of this team right now, so you've got Jared Goff, obviously Hendon Hooker backing him up.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams as your 1-2. You've got Khalif Raymond as your 3.
Mm-hmm.
Still have Ronnie Bell. Who knows what he's going to be? Antoine Green's listed on here for some reason. I'm not sure why. I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. That's a financial summary. That's the wrong list.
And saw somebody, I think it was Brandy in the chat, that was asking or saying that Vildor signed with Tampa. Yes, that is confirmed. He goes to Tampa on a one-year deal.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with position by position. So you've got Kingsley Aguakan, backup center to Frank Ragnow. You've got Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw, Amik Robertson, Stanley Thomas Oliver, obviously DJ Reed, Brian Branch, Morris Norris. That's your DB room, minus the safeties. In the safety room, you have Eric Hallett, Kirby Joseph, Lauren Strickland, Brian Branch obviously being there. So when you look at starters, Frank's your starter, Terrion's a starter, Amik Robertson's a starter, DJ's a starter.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at defensive line, right now it's Marcus Davenport, Aiden Hutchinson on the edge. It's a Lee McNeil, DJ Reader in the middle. And then you have, let me take that back. It's Aiden Hutchinson and Josh Paschal, I feel, on the edge. Davenport's a backup right now.
Okay.
I think that they're going to give Paschal another shot on the outside. I'm hoping that Paschal drops a little bit of weight. If you guys haven't watched this Kentucky tape, please do. Like what I witnessed out of Paschal last year and then went and watched his tape with some of the members a couple weeks ago, I was like, wow, like he can do it. He just went up in weight and transitioned to the inside. That versatility is there. If he drops some weight and gets a little bit lighter, more speed, I think Paschal's going to be fine off the edge. And maybe that's why they're thinking that they don't need to bring anybody in because of what Paschal was able to do last year. For his first year really at playing edge for a large portion of the snaps, I mean, he did great. So you've got Ali McNeil and DJ in the middle. You've got Miles Adams now backing them up. Broderick Martin, who has yet to show us what he can do. Chris Smith, Isaac Ukwu, Mekhi Wingo. They're listed as defensive line. I think Ukwu is a little bit more on the outside, though. Mekhi Wingo, inside, outside. Jake Bates, obviously a kicker. I'm sure the Lions are bringing another kicker for camp. Linebacker room, we've already discussed. Alex, Derek, Jack. Those are your top 3. Hogan Hatton's our long snapper. Offensive line, right to left. You'll go Penei Sewell, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, Mahogany, and Decker. I would love to see a Giovanni Manu take a big step up this year and kind of fold into that swing tackle with Skipper and see if he can fight Skipper off this year and maybe get an opportunity. But I don't think that you can discredit Skipper's versatility and in his experience right now. Jack Fox, obviously the punter. Jared Goff, starting quarterback. You have Hendon Hooker, Jake Fromm behind him. Jameer and David, 1-1. Silvaki, number 2. Craig was re-signed, right?
He was, yep.
Yeah, so Craig's in at number 2.
Yep. And then I guess, Vaki would be As you're looking at this, man, to me it seems you've got to draft a defensive back, and they're going to draft somebody on the D line and somebody on the offensive line, because almost all these spots are taken.
What is this? Motown Mitch is saying skip. What's that?
Maybe he's just really excited about a skip, and Dan Campbell.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah. Idris said something about the sound glitching.
Whatever damn audio issues we are having, is it? I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it on my way into work and hear. Hopefully it sounds good, but let us know, guys, if it's not. And yes, Jay Cruising Cup is still available. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I think Will made a.
Yeah, I think I know that Riley's having a little bit of internet issue this morning. I don't know if you're plugged in or not, but
yeah,
you were glitching a little bit today. You just got to double check your ISP and make sure that latency is not too high. So tight end, you've got Sam Laporta, obviously number 1, Brock Wright number 2. So my question in the tight end room is like we're not settled in the tight end room. We still need a number 3, and I'm not so sure that Saint Zielstra is going to get an opportunity here. And moving forward, I almost think the tight end is probably on the board this year for Brad Holmes. I would not be surprised if they grab a tight end in this draft. I really wouldn't be surprised. Jamarco Jones, I'm glad that he's back, I believe. Is he re-signed? Or did he get a futures?
Let me see if I can look that up. I don't
think he could get a futures.
Tight end would make sense, particularly a tight end that can block really well.
Oh, and I forgot about Levi. So Levi, obviously on the defensive tackle, I think our defensive tackle room is pretty good. I still would like to see a good rookie. I'll walk down a couple of more. I know we're up against 10 o'clock here. Wide receiver room, we already went over that. I think wide receivers also. I'm leaning more towards a wide receiver in this draft too. Which I know going offense doesn't make a lot of sense in a deep defensive tackle draft. But again, when you look at the defensive tackles that the Lions have right now, Aleem, DJ. Aleem's going to take a hot second to get back. And Levi coming back. He's going to stick. Josh Paschal should stick. So I think there's going to be a dogfight between Chris Smith, Nate Lynn, Miles Adams, and the rookie or two that the Lions bring in. We really have pretty much the same roster that we had last year, outside of a couple of depth pieces, which is insane to me because that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen very often. Derek wants to know when they turn the electric on in Utah, Riley.
All right, you guys. I love you guys.
Hey, it's early in Utah. He doesn't want to be this big UFO glowing at 5:30 in the morning, in his community. Like, what is going on in that house? The crackheads looking through the blinds again over there? What's going on?
Yeah, if I see him pull up, I'll just say, come on in, guys. It's Rocked On Detroitlions. We got to get the... Hey, appreciate everybody seriously being in and supporting Will and the channel and the foundation. And it's such an awesome part of my morning. I know Eric's being out of town right now too. I'm happy to be here every day, but particularly with the days when he's out. But yeah, Scott Young says, is that Riley or is that Batman? Nobody has ever seen the two of us in, the same room together. So I'll leave it up to your interpretation on it. But hopefully, yeah, please do let me know, guys, if my audio or anything is not up to snuff here, because I don't want to be here if I'm not meeting my end. And
oh, you're doing fine, man. We just got to double check your internet. But so Zielstra was not tendered, so he is hitting free agency. Coyote Owasika that I expected. him not to be back either. Let me just double check my list, which I'll have to update here. So as far as today goes, I'll probably be back a little bit later, especially if we get breaking news. I'll be back, but I'm thinking tonight might be a good opportunity to have another conversation later as we kind of get through the day.
I've got a handful of people bookmarked from other teams, writers whose work I'm coming across that I have made notes I'm going to reach out to and see if we can't line up having them coming on the show sometime one of these evenings to talk about their team, give us some good insight on teams in the division, any team in the NFL. It's always beneficial to get an inside look from a insider, from a specific team.
Hey, did we say something about Khalil Dorsey earlier?
Not that I can recall.
Was there any news? I thought that there was some news on him. Does anybody hear anything about Khalil Dorsey? I'm just going through things, and I thought I could have sworn I saw something on Khalil. Maybe not. So looking back at my list, I had Miles Adams as a guy that I wanted to see back. Obviously, Kendall Vildor I was out on. Emmanuel Mosley I was out on. Carlton Davis, I figured he would be gone. Ifeatu Melifonwu I was out on. Now, Ifeatu I was out on unless something happened with Kirby. If something happened with Kirby, then Ifeatu I thought would be back. I think that the minute that we heard that Mel was out, that leads me to believe that something's going to get done with Kirby. Al-Quddin Muhammad, I was warm on. John Kaminsky out. Davenport, we know that he's back. I was warm on him. Kyle Pecco, I was warm on him coming back. No word on that yet. Levi, I was out if it was going to be over the $7 million mark, so they got a good deal on him. Coyote Owasika I was out on. Kevin Zeitler, I was warm on him unless the deal was north of $7.5 million, which it was. So he's now a Titan. Quan Alexander, I don't think that he'll be back. Trevor Nowaski, I wanted back. Anthony Pittman, I was out on simply because I thought that they were going to go a different direction. He's back for a camp body. Derek Barnes, I thought was going to be too expensive, but I was warm on him coming back. Turner, I was out on because of what he did last year, but you know what? We'll give the guy another go, right? I'm sure he's going to make me regret saying that I wasn't high on him. I hope so.
Yes.
Let's see. Craig Reynolds. He's back. Yeah.
He is. Yep.
He's back. Connor Galvin. I was warm on. Is he back? I'm forgetting what we talked about this morning now.
I don't think we discussed Galvin. And just keeping an eye on Spotrac here. Since the Kindle Vildor news broke this morning, only movement I'm seeing, center David Andrews of the New England Patriots was released. Jamin Davis re-ups in New York on a one-year deal, linebacker for the Jets. And then New Orleans Saints tight end Jack Stoll signs a one-year contract. So not a ton of movement, but man, I'll tell you, as we're going through the Lions depth chart and just looking at all these spots, it kind of makes sense. We're just kind of like, come on, Brad, do something. But there's just not a lot of open spots.
Matthew Agerstrand keeps saying your mic is messed up. I don't know what you're talking about, but sometimes there's a glitch. Internet issues happens with everybody. If that's what you're referring to. Anyway, so Tim Patrick, I thought would be back. No word. Dan Skipper, I thought would be back. He's back. Shane Zielstra, I did not think he would be back. He's not. He's going to test free agency. Morris Norris, I thought he would be back. He's back. Ben Nyman, I thought that he would be back. No word. Trevor, I thought would be back. He's back. So, I think I'm hitting at 80% this year on the guys that I thought that would be back. That's not terrible. It's not terrible. You can never know for sure, right? But I think just based on how the guys finished and what they did last season, you kind of get a good idea of whether they deserve to be back or not, or whether, Brad and Dan think that they're going to be good players. Did someone want to call in? Is that what I'm seeing? That someone wanted to call in? Who was it?
Do we have the number on the screen?
Can we have a call into the show? A fantasy show, call in the show happens. Yeah. So you can definitely call in. Are you going to be back here tomorrow, Matthew? Because we're about to jump off. I did have phone lines open after 8:30, but no one called in. So the phone number looks like I need to update my background here and put the phone number back in because it's not up. So tomorrow we'll make sure that we get it open. And that'll be all for today. Riley, anything you want to end with?
No, I think it's crazy whether I'm on as a guest or in the audience. It's crazy how quick 2 hours goes. It's just so damn fun talking football, talking Lions football with Will and everybody in the channel. So guys, on your way out, again, we ask a couple times a show, but let me just ask, if you haven't hit the like button, please do for us, and please do subscribe to the channel. This is the best damn Detroit Lions channel on the internet. I'm biased, but I mean it. It's heartfelt, and I think everybody in here feels the same because you're back every day, and I know it's appreciated. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we'll be back again tomorrow morning here with Will.
All right. It's another day of action for Brad Holmes today, or in action. He's probably golfing. It's supposed to be really nice out today, so he's probably hitting the links and doesn't care about signing anybody, but most of your good deals get done on the golf course, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. No shots fired at Amon-Ra or Jared, just conversation, just talking about the what ifs. Other teams are doing it. If you feel like Brad needs to spend the money, I think that would be a fly on the wall moment. Like if you just walked into someone's office and said, "Hey, I really want to get this player on the team. What do you think? I'll give you some money back to do it." Interesting conversation, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes wants to win again, and he's going to do whatever he has to do to make sure that team has money to win. And we have yet to see the contract restructures in Detroit. They haven't had to do it at all. And does that speak to the type of contracts that the Lions put together, that they're well orchestrated? Obviously, every year we have capital now. And the last point that I'm going to make is, I keep hearing from fans that, how come we can never do this or we can never do that, and all these other teams have money? Just go back to 2021 and 2022. We did not have any money. Literally, we did not have any money. It was a lot of dead cap. The Lions had major contract issues from the previous regime. So when you look at 23 and 24, those are the real first years that Brad has had some cap to work with. He never probably, I know this for a fact, or at least, let me repeat that. There's no way Brad Holmes wants to walk back to that. And I think that it would be fairly factual that no team wants to have a bunch of dead cap. It just tends to happen with bad contracts. I don't think that Brad wants to write bad contracts. I think he wants his team flush with cap so that he can continue to fill every single year and then have that kitty put away in the event that we have a season like we did last year. So we can disagree all day long, but I would rather have the Lions have money in the bank than not.
Absolutely.
So, all right, y'all. Have a wonderful day. Go Lions. Go in pride. We'll see you guys all in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.